اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم الحمد للہ رب العالمین الرحمن الرحیم مالک یوم الدین ایاک نعبد و ایاک نستعین اہدنا الصراط المستقیم صراط الذین انعمت علیہم غیر المغضوب علیہم ولا الضالین. پتھر پہ علامدین کا گاڑا کس نے؟ مرحب سے زبردست کو مارا کس نے؟ اصحاب پیمبر وہ سبھی تو موجود، بولو بولو در خیبر کو کھاڑا کس نے؟ نعرہ حیدری.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ، حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ. کچھ آنسوؤں کے عوض کائنات لے جاؤ، حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ. او یہ کربلا ہے یہ معجز نما کی بستی ہے، یہ کربلا ہے یہ معجز نما کی بستی ہے. کفن میں اس کے لپے تو حیات لے جاؤ، حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ، حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ. او کہیں گے ماتمی حلقوں سے لوگ محشر میں، کہیں گے ماتمی حلقوں سے لوگ محشر میں، ہمیں حسین کی جنت میں ساتھ لے جاؤ، حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ. اور نہیں کروں گا لحد میں انتہار سحر، نہیں کروں گا لحد میں انتظار سحر. فرشتوں کرب و بلا را تو رات لے جاؤ، فرشتوں کرب و بلا را تو رات لے جاؤ. قسم حسین کی پر سے میں کم ہی لگتا ہے، قسم حسین کی پر سے میں کم ہی لگتا ہے. बुलंद जितना भी मातम में हाथ ले जाओ, हुसैन बांट रहे हैं निजात ले जाओ। अब वो ज़ात पाक के जिस की न टालता हो खुदा, बना के अपना हवाला वो ज़ात ले जाओ, हुसैन बांट रहे हैं निजात ले जाओ। मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु।
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والحمد لله الذي جعل الحمد مفتاحا لذكره وسببا للمزيد من فضله ودليلا على آلائه وعظمته، والصلاة والسلام على خاتم رسوله إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين، الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين، والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والإبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكادمية والحجج الردوية والجود الثقفية والنقابة النكبية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وصاهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الإمام الحسين بن علي: إني لم أخرج أشيرا ولا بطيرا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما، إنما خرجت لطلب الإسلاف أمة جد محمد صلى الله عليه وآله أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير بسيرة جد محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وأبي علي بن أبي طالب. صدق مولانا الإمام الحسين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatimatu Zahra in particular, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, one more salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. When it comes to historical analysis, and one wants to understand the significance of a moment or the importance of a day, you find that the context of that day and that moment are of the utmost importance. Because if a person does not understand the situation leading up to the event, then they won't understand the grandeur of the event itself. That, for example, when a Rasulullah comes and creates a civilization, that even while Europe was in the Dark Ages, the civilization would produce an output in technology and science and in literature. If you don't understand the context of this civilization, then you're not going to understand what the value was. The fact is that in the Arabian desert, you find that there was no established governance over there. And in between the superpowers of that time, the Roman Empire and the Sassanids, you find a civilization was created in Arabia. And it is through this context over here, we begin to see the importance of the rise of Rasulullah and the impact of Rasulullah. Similarly, in these nights, if we're going to understand the significance of Ashura and the importance of the stand of Imam Al-Hussein and just how grand the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada was, then it's vital for us to understand those events which preceded the day of Ashura and led to the day of Ashura. Because when you look at this entire journey of Imam al-Hussein, from the land of Medina towards Makkah and all the way towards Karbala, you find that throughout this journey, Sayyid al-Shuhada gives statement after statement. And when you examine those statements which come leading to the day of Ashura, then you'll understand that what were the goals of the movement of Imam al-Hussein. For example, you find that when Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, when the Imam, he leaves the land of Medina, you find Sayyid al-Shuhada leaves a will and a wasiyah. And if you're going to understand that what was the movement of Ashura about, you find that this wasiyah and this will is of fundamental importance. That Imam al-Hussein says to his half-brother Muhammad al-Hanafiya, that inni lam akhruj ashiran wala batira wala mufsidan wala dhalima. That I am not leading and I am not leaving here to cause evil and corruption and as a tyrant. But rather I am leaving إنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. He says that the only reason I am leaving is to reform the nation of my grandfather, to enjoin others towards good, to forbid evil, and to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather and my father Ali ibn Abi Talib. You see, this one line, which is not the entire wasiyah, this one line which takes place in the larger context leading to the day of Ashura, gives us a number of different insights into what the mindset of Imam Al-Hussein was and what the objectives of Imam Al-Hussein were. For example, the first thing Sayyid al-Shuhada says is that I am seeking to reform the nation of my grandfather. The goal of Karbala and all of that sacrifice which came in Karbala, whether it was the martyrdom of Abbas or it was the 6-month infant Ali Asghar, all of this blood which was shed was to take the ummah to the original deen and the teachings of the Prophet. You know, in that sense, Karbala is not a revolution in the modern sense of the word. Because when you look at the word revolution in the sense of the French Revolution, you find the word revolution in English means to uproot something and to bring it about new. Even in Arabic, the word for revolution used is inqilab. Inqilab means to overturn something. Sayyid al-Shuhada never uses the word inqilab not a single time to describe his movement. But rather what this movement was, it was not uprooting and bringing something new, but rather it was to take mankind back to their origin, back towards that humanity, and back towards the teachings of Rasulullah. And in that sense, Karbala was a qiyam and a stand which Sayyid al-Shuhada carried out. After all, the title of the Imam of our time is what? It's Al-Qa'im Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. Al-Qa'im is that individual who takes a stand, and that is what Sayyid al-Shuhada shows. So this is the first point we take from this wasiyah. Another point that Sayyid al-Shuhada mentions is that he says, I am going to enjoin good and to forbid evil. You see, from the second level, just from this line which comes in the context of Karbala, we understand that this movement of Imam al-Hussein was not for his own personal status, nor was it for his own reputation, nor was it for his own fame, but rather Sayyid al-Shuhada's concern was the ummah of Rasulullah, that I am reforming this nation and this ummah. You know, at the end of the day, Imam al-Hussein could have sat home. He didn't have to go to Karbala. You know, this is that individual that 50 years ago, Rasulullah already said, Al-Hasan wal-Hussein Sayyiday Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. That Hassan and Hussein are the leaders of the youth of paradise. Paradise was guaranteed to Sayyid al-Shuhada. But despite that, Imam al-Hussein takes on this difficulty. Why? Because his concern was for the nation and in the community of his grandfather. From the third level, the third point that we take from this wasiyah is that the Imam, he says, that I am following the footstep of my grandfather Rasulullah and my father Ali ibn Abi Talib. You see, over here, a vital point is made. When Imam al-Hussein said that I am following the footstep of my grandfather Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen was the very nafs and the self of Rasulullah on the day of Mubahilah. When he said, I'm following the footstep of Rasulullah, that automatically includes Ali ibn Abi Talib. There is no contradiction, but Imam al-Hussein explicitly mentions his father as a reminder that, O Ummah of the Prophet, one of the reasons you went astray is because you neglected the status of my father Ali ibn Abi Talib. So the point I'm making is just from these two lines from the wasiyah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, we came to so many different understandings about what the reality of the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada was. And thus, for us to understand the greatness of the day of Ashura, it's important for us to understand that context which led to the day of Ashura. And that's why the subject of analysis in tonight's majlis is to examine those events which took place from Medina towards Karbala. Because many times, even though we've been attending majalis our entire life, if someone were to ask you that what happened when Imam Al-Hussein was killed, most people will reply by saying Yazid came into power, he ordered the killing of Imam Al-Hussein was martyred. But no, you find the reality is something which is much more profound. There were many events which led to that point, and I'll discuss those events in the following stages. Number one, in what circumstances does the Imam leave the city of Medina? Number two, what occurs when the Imam goes from Medina to Makkah? Number three, in what manner does the Imam go from Makkah towards Karbala? And number four, what happens when the Imam arrives in Karbala before the day of Ashura? And in this sense, the goal of this lecture is to give a summary of the key events which took place from Medina towards Karbala. Because to go into depth in history over here, each of these portions of the journey is a lecture of its own. But from the first angle, many individuals, they have this misconception that Sayyid al-Shuhada, as soon as he became the Imam after the death of Imam al-Hassan, he begins this uprising. But no, the reality of the situation is this, is that Imam al-Hussein is martyred in the 61st year after the Hijrah and the migration of Rasulullah. Imam al-Hassan is martyred in the 50th year after the Hijrah. In other words, there was an 11-year gap between the martyrdom of Imam al-Hassan and the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein. So the question is that what was Imam al-Hussein doing for those 10 years before Karbala? Because his period of imamat had begun in the 50th year after Hijrah. You see, Imam al-Hussein carried out the same policy of Imam al-Hassan. Imam al-Hassan's policy was, as long as Muawiyah is in power, we will not have an uprising. But as soon as Muawiyah passes away, then that uprising will occur. At the end of the day, Rasulullah, when he speaks about Imam Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, he says, Al-Hassan wal-Hussein imaman qama o qa'uda. That Hassan and Hussein are imams, whether they're sitting or whether they're standing. In other words, whether it is a reconciliation and a peace treaty, or whether it is an uprising, it doesn't lessen the reality of their imamat. So you find for that period of 10 years, before the death of Muawiyah, Sayyid al-Shuhada carries out the same policy of Imam al-Hassan. But in the 60th year after Hijrah, the year before Karbala, Muawiyah dies upon the 15th of Rajab. When Muawiyah dies upon the 15th of Rajab, you find 3 days after his death, upon the 18th of Rajab, the process begins for the Muslim Ummah to give bay'ah and allegiance towards Yazid. You know, before Muawiyah passed away, Muawiyah said to Yazid that I have subjugated the Arabs and I have broken their back. In other words, everything is under our control. But when you come into power, be aware of 4 individuals. The first individual is Abdul Rahman ibn Abi Bakr. The second individual is Abdullah ibn Umar. The third individual is Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and the fourth individual is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He says, as for Abdul Rahman ibn Abi Bakr, he's only busy with sport and women, he won't be a concern to you. Abdullah ibn Umar is an individual who follows his desires, he won't be a concern towards you. The only individuals you have to worry about is Hussein ibn Ali, because of the love that the people have for him, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr. You see, the first thing Yazid does when he gets into power, his very first concern is to send a letter to the governor of Medina that my father Muawiyah has died, and make sure you get allegiance and bay'ah from the people of Medina. And in particular, he attaches a small piece of paper and he says, make sure you get bay'ah from Abdullah bin Umar, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and Hussein ibn Ali. And if they don't give you allegiance, then cut their necks off and send it towards me. You see, when this messenger of Yazid arrives in Medina, he goes to Walid ibn Utbah. And that governor of Medina was actually one of the nephews of Muawiyah. You see, one quality that we see in Banu Umayyah is that they did not look at the qualities and the attributes of their governors, but rather they fell into the trap of nepotism. You see, whenever it comes to a position, whether it's the mosque, whether it's your work, whether it's somewhere else, you find the number one quality is the character of a person and the ability of that person even before that nepotism it comes in. So this letter, it gets to Walid bin Utbah. When Walid bin Utbah, he reads the letter, you find that he goes into a state of worry. Why? Because in it, it stated that either you get allegiance from Hussein or you cut the head of Imam Al-Hussein. Now, even though these individuals, they were not profound lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, but at the end of the day, Sayyid al-Shuhada is a prominent personality. He is the grandson of Rasulullah. So who does he get advice from? He gets advice from Marwan ibn al-Hakam. Marwan ibn al-Hakam is the one who is the son of that man that when Rasulullah would go out after the death of his child, that man would say, Al-Abtar, Al-Abtar, that your lineage is cut. At that moment, the Quran replied to the father of Marwan ibn al-Hakam, Inna a'ataynaka al-Kawthar. That, O Prophet, your lineage isn't cut. We are giving you Kawthar. We are giving you abundance. And then he says, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْهَرْ إِنَّ شَانِئَكَ هُوَ الْأَبْتَرُ. That the lineage of your enemies is cut. So this begs the question that what was the lineage of Marwan ibn al-Hakam? So you find this individual, he says to Walid, the governor of Medina, that your best course of action is that before news goes to the people of Medina that Muawiyah is dead, and they begin to pledge allegiance, you call Hussein right now, and you get this allegiance from Hussein, or you cut his head and send it back to Damascus. You know, Walid bin Utbah, at that point, he sends his messenger to go and find Imam Al-Hussein and Abdullah bin Zubayr. When that messenger goes, he finds that Imam Al-Hussein is in the mosque of the Prophet. And Abdullah bin Zubayr happened to be in the mosque at the same time. As soon as the messenger Walid bin Utbah, the governor of Medina, comes, Abdullah bin Zubayr begins to panic. He says that why is this convoy coming calling for us at night? Nothing positive happens when it comes at this time. Imam al-Hussein says to Abdullah bin Zubayr, don't worry. I am assuming that the tyrant Muawiyah has died and these individuals, they want bay'ah and allegiance. You know what Sayyid al-Shuhada does? He goes to the complex of Banu Hashim. He gathers the members of his family, the men of his family, and he goes to the governor's palace. You see, there are two lessons that we take from here. The first lesson in this action of Sayyid al-Shuhada we take is that Imam al-Hussein in the path of truth was an individual who was fearless. When it came to doing the right thing, Sayyid al-Shuhada was an individual who displayed bravery. But at the second level, Imam al-Hussein took the members of his family with them and he told them, stand at the door, and if you hear that our voices are raising, then come in and take me away from this governor. At the second level, Imam al-Hussein planned his affair as well. You know, there's a hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. This hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen, it says, "At-tadbiru qabla al-amali yu'minuka min al-nadam." That when an individual is able to plan before carrying out an action, this prevents an individual from being sorrowful after an action. Or another tradition of the Imam, it says, "Aqalu nas andaruhum fil awaqib." That the most intelligent person, the person with the sharpest intellect, is the person who has the best insight into the outcomes of different affairs. You know, when you look at many of the great thinkers and geniuses in history, what set those individuals apart from everyone else is that these individuals were able to see the outcome of that action better than those other people. They had a better perception. Over here, Sayyid al-Shuhada shows his perception that yes, I'm going at night to the governor's palace, but I'm planning my affair and I'm going with bravery. When Imam Al-Hussein, he enters in front of the governor of Medina, the governor of Medina says to Imam Al-Hussein that Muawiyah has died and I want allegiance from you. You know what Sayyid al-Shuhada says? Imam Al-Hussein says that I will give allegiance in the daytime when you ask from the rest of the people. The moment Sayyid al-Shuhada says this, Marwan, who was in the gathering, he says, "Oh Walid, do not let this man leave. If he leaves tonight, there will be blood which is shed between you and him." Imam al-Hussein says to Marwan, "Oh Yabna Zarqa." Yabna Zarqa means that you are the son of a blue-eyed woman, which is a symbol in Arabic for somebody who had an impure profession as a woman. So you find the Imam says to him, "Are you going to kill me or is he going to kill me?" You see, Sayyid al-Shuhada, after that, the companions of the Imam come in as they're taking him away. The Imam, he looks to Walid and he says, "Oh Walid, Ayyuhal Amir, O governor, Inna Ahlu Baytin Nabuwa," that we are that household of prophethood. And we are the ones who are ma'adanur risala, and we are the mine of the message. You know, the mine is the ultimate source. We are the source of that message. Wa mukhtalaful malaika, we are that place where the angels, they descend upon us. And we are wa mahbatur rahma, and we are where the mercy of God descends. And then after that, Sayyid al-Shuhada, after he says all of this, he says, "Wa Yazid sharibul khamar," that Yazid is an individual who drinks alcohol. "Wa qatilun nafs al-muhtarama," and he kills those souls which are prohibited. "Wa mu'linun bil fisk," and he sins and he has vice openly. "Wa mithli la yubaya'u mithla," and an individual like me can never give allegiance to a man like him. You see, over here, Imam al-Hussein's stand was very different than the stand of Abdullah bin Zubayr. Both of them were called by the governor. Imam al-Hussein with bravery goes over there. But Abdullah bin Zubayr, in the middle of the night, he decides to leave Medina and he goes through the non-main route, through the hidden route, and he goes to Makkah. In this manner, you find Imam al-Hussein begins his preparation to leave Medina. Sayyid al-Shuhada, he leaves Medina on the 28th of Rajab. But before Imam al-Hussein leaves Medina, Shaykh al-Suduq in his Amali, he writes that Imam al-Hussein goes to the grave of Rasulullah. And when he goes to the grave of Rasulullah, it's written by Saduq that it's as if nur and light was emanating from the grave of the Prophet. And Imam al-Hussein, as he sits by the grave of Rasulullah, he falls asleep upon that grave. And within his dream, he sees the Prophet of God, and the Prophet of God says that, "Oh Hussein, there is a status that cannot be attained except through shahada and martyrdom." Now, over here, as the Imam is leaving Medina, there is a discussion in history about who left with Sayyid al-Shuhada. Some of the historical sources say that the men who left with Imam al-Hussein numbered 20 in total numbers, such as Aba Fadl Abbas, such as Qasim, such as Ali Akbar. Another source says that his entire family, except for Muhammad al-Hanafiya, went. And there are other sources that say that he leaves behind his daughter by the name of Fatima, more commonly known as Fatimatul Sughra. And on the 28th of Rajab, Sayyid al-Shuhada, going from the main route from Medina, leaves for Makkah. And you know, as Imam al-Hussein leaves upon the 28th of Rajab, Imam al-Hussein recites the same line which Nabi Musa recited as he left the land of Fir'aun. And it is chapter 28, verse 21 of the Quran, where it says, فَخَرَجَ مِنْهَا خَائِفًا يَتَرَقَّبُ قَالَ رَبِّي نَجِّنِي مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. Sayyid al-Shuhada, he says, this verse of the Quran, it says, which the Imam quotes, is that he left in a state of fear and vigilance, saying, "Oh Allah, save me from the transgressing people." In other words, when Imam al-Hussein begins his movement and he quotes from Nabi Musa, he is showing the Ummah that I am the Musa of this time period, and the one who opposes me is the Pharaoh of this time period. Imam al-Hussein, on the 28th of Rajab, he leaves Medina. In 4 to 5 days, upon the 3rd of Sha'ban, he arrives in the land of Makkah. You see, Imam al-Hussein, after going from Medina to Makkah, he stays in Makkah from the 3rd of Sha'ban through the month of Shahr Ramadan, through the month of Shawwal, through the month of Dhul Qa'dah, and he leaves Makkah upon the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. So the question is, when the Imam is in Makkah for 3 to 4 months, what was Imam al-Hussein doing in Makkah before going towards Karbala? The first thing which Sayyid al-Shuhada did in Makkah is he sent a number of envoys and letters to the people of Basra. He wanted to see that are the people of Basra a group of individuals that would support him. But at the second level, you find that at that point, the people of Kufa had gathered within the house of an individual by the name of Sulaiman bin Surad al-Khuzai, and they began to send letters to Imam al-Hussein. You see, within that house, they said that we were the followers of Ali bin Abi Talib, and now is an opportunity to support the son of Ali. So we will send these letters to Imam al-Hussein. You know, it's stated that roughly 18 to 20,000 letters came to Sayyid al-Shuhada according to certain historical sources. And each of these letters had 1, 2, or 3 signatures upon them. When Imam al-Hussein received all of these letters, he finally sent a messenger back towards them. And that messenger was Sa'id al-Hanafi, and he said within that letter as a reply that if you are truthful, I am going to send you my cousin Muslim bin Aqil. قَدْ بَعَدْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ أَخِي وَابْنَ عَمِّي وَثِقَتِي مِنْ أَهْلِ بَيْتِي. That I am sending to you the one who is the trustworthy one of Ahlul Bayt. And if Muslim bin Aqil conveys what you are saying, then I will come towards the land of Kufa. You see, when you look in the Maqatil, right? When you look in the Maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf, when Muslim bin Aqil, he leaves Makkah, there is a story which is outwardly strange. It says that as Muslim leaves Makkah to go towards Kufa, he goes to Medina and he gets lost in the desert. He takes 2 guides with him, desert guides, and he gets lost in the desert. And when he gets lost in the desert, he says that I take this as a bad omen. He writes to Imam al-Hussein that can I return from this mission? And Imam al-Hussein says, don't be a coward, carry out this action. Now you see, there's a number of issues with such a narrative. The first issue is that this does not reflect the status of Muslim ibn Aqil. That Muslim ibn Aqil, coming from the household of Banu Aqil, was an individual who was the utmost loyal to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. But from the second level, Muslim leaves on the 15th of Ramadan. And he arrives in the 5th of Shawwal, a period of 20 days. It is not historically possible that an individual leaves from Makkah, stops in Medina for 2 days, gets lost, sends a messenger from the outskirts of Makkah back to Medina. The messenger replies telling him to go forward and go to Kufa. If you want to reach Kufa, which is about 1,400 kilometers from Makkah, it has to be a straight shot. And for that to be a straight shot, only then it can be a 20-day journey. So you find Muslim bin Aqil, he arrives within the land of Kufa. Now when Muslim arrives within the land of Kufa, he goes and he stays in the house of Mukhtar. When he stays in the house of Mukhtar, what would happen is that the Shia in Kufa, they would come, Muslim bin Aqil would read the letter of Imam Al-Hussein, and they would give allegiance to Muslim bin Aqil. For example, amongst those individuals who gave bay'ah and allegiance to Muslim bin Aqil was an individual by the name of Abis ibn Shabib al-Shakiri. Abis was an individual who was one of the martyrs on the day of Ashura. You know what Abis says to Muslim? Abis, he says to Muslim that I cannot speak for those individuals, but I can speak for myself. And as for me, when the son of Fatima calls upon me, I will answer towards him. And when the son of Fatima is in danger, I will defend him. And when the son of Fatima goes to battle, I will go to battle with him. So you find there were individuals who showed the utmost loyalty. At that time, those who were in Kufa, they stopped listening to the governor in Kufa by the name of Nu'man bin Bashir. They had already told Sayyid al-Shuhada that we do not go to Jum'ah, we do not pray behind him. When he gives a lecture, we don't listen to him. When Muslim bin Aqil arrives in Kufa, 18,000 individuals give allegiance to Muslim bin Aqil. That 18,000 isn't a small number. But you find that Banu Umayyah would use tactic after tactic to make sure that number it dwindles down. For example, when Muslim bin Aqil comes in, Nu'man bin Bashir, who was the governor at that time, he says that if you will fight me, I will fight you. But if you don't fight me, then I won't do anything. Umar bin Saad, at that point who is in Kufa, he sends a letter to Yazid and he says, oh Yazid, this individual is a weak man. The best course of action is to fight. But this individual is being passive. So you find that what happens is that Yazid, upon the advice of his father's confidant Sarjun, he sends Ibn Ziyad to Kufa. When Ibn Ziyad is sent towards Kufa, you find that he comes at the time of night. And Ibn Ziyad was wearing black and covering his face. You know, when Ibn Ziyad is entering Kufa, everyone began to think that Imam Al-Hussein has arrived. Because imagine, you wrote a letter for Imam Al-Hussein to come. You see a man coming at the middle of the night, his face is covered, he's coming with an entourage. Naturally, they began to think that it's Sayyid al-Shuhada who is there. But eventually, they realized that it's Ibn Ziyad, and Ibn Ziyad begins to disperse the people of Kufa. The first thing he does is that Muslim bin Aqil goes from the house of Mukhtar to the house of Hani. The first tactic that Ibn Ziyad uses is that he sends his servant as a spy to find out the whereabouts of Muslim bin Aqil. You see, the servant by the name of Maqil, Ibn Ziyad gives him 3,000 dirhams. And he says that give this money to the followers of Muslim bin Aqil so they can gain your trust. Muslim ibn al-Awsaja was within the mosque. This Ma'qil, he says to Muslim bin Awsaja that I am one of the people of Syria and I have been blessed with the love of Ahlul Bayt within my heart, and I want to go and give allegiance to Muslim bin Aqil. Here are 3,000 dirhams to go and give towards Muslim. You see, these 3,000 dirhams, they go to Muslim. Muslim eventually gives permission for this individual to come. This man, he ends up spying upon Muslim and telling Ibn Ziyad that he's staying within the house of Hani ibn al-Urwa. Hani ibn al-Urwa was an individual who was from amongst the leaders of his tribe. Ibn Ziyad, he calls Hani. He says, "Oh Hani, are you housing Muslim within your home?" Hani says, "No, Muslim isn't within my home." But at that point, Ibn Ziyad says, "Oh Ma'qil, come out." The moment Ma'qil, he comes out, Hani realized that this individual was a spy who was sent by Ibn Ziyad. And you find that Hani ibn Urwa is imprisoned, and after the killing of Muslim bin Aqil, you find that Hani is massacred and he is martyred within a sheep market. So you find up to this point, Sayyid al-Shuhada leaves Medina. He arrives in Makkah, he sends Muslim bin Aqil. Muslim bin Aqil gathers a support of 18,000 people. Ibn Ziyad comes to Kufa, he kills Hani ibn Urwa. The next portion of the narrative leading to the day of Ashura, you see, if we're going to understand the discussions in the subsequent nights, it's important for us to have this summary and this sketch of events which took place. You find the next thing that Ibn Ziyad does, as soon as Hani bin Urwa is killed, Muslim ibn Aqil, he begins his uprising. It's stated in the sources from 4,000 to 18,000 people come out with Muslim, and they had surrounded the palace of Ibn Ziyad. And it's stated that there was none in the palace of Ibn Ziyad except for his family. Imagine you have 20, 30 people in a palace, and on the outside you have 4,000 individuals. But Ibn Ziyad, he gives a speech, and he says that if you don't go away, then an army from Syria will come and massacre you. You see, the lesson that we take from this is that if those individuals had remained steadfast, at that moment, 4,000 against 30 people inside of a palace, they would have taken control of that palace. Oftentimes, when we give up on things, we give up when the result is right over there. But those individuals who persevere and hold on, you find eventually that result will come. And you find when this happens, the people begin to disperse to the point that Muslim bin Aqil, from having 18,000 people, by the time of Maghrib that day had 400 individuals. And by the time that Maghrib is finished, you find Muslim is alone in Kufa. And you know the rest of the narrative, that Muslim goes to the house of a lady who he finds in Kufa who shelters him, and eventually Muslim ibn al-Aqil is killed upon the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. You find before Muslim was killed, one of the actions which he carried out is that he sent a messenger to Imam Al-Hussein. And he told that messenger that when you are going to Sayyid al-Shuhada, tell him that the people of Kufa are with him and for him to hurry towards Kufa. You know, when Muslim was being killed, he says to Umar bin Saad, "O Umar bin Saad, there is a tribal connection between us. My will is two things. The first will that I have is that I borrowed 700 coins from an individual of this town, return it towards him." You see, the followers of Ahlul Bayt are careful about the property of others. But the second thing he says is, "O Umar bin Saad, I sent a messenger telling Hussein to come towards Kufa. Go and tell him not to come towards here. Umar bin Saad, he rejects this request. So over here, you find that on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, Muslim bin Aqil is killed. Imam Al-Hussein departs from Makkah upon the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. Imam Al-Hussein, when he departs from Makkah, in between Makkah and his arrival in Karbala, there were 35 halting stations that the Imam stopped at. And at each of these halting stations, there were key events which took place. For example, the first halting station from Makkah towards Karbala was the halting station known as At-Tan'im. At At-Tan'im, Imam al-Hussein gains news that Muslim bin Aqil is killed. And when he gains this news that Muslim is killed, he looks towards the family of Aqil and he says, you're allowed to return. The sacrifice of Muslim was enough. But each of them, they say, oh, Aba Abdullah, after you, what is there, O Hussein? You see, the second halting station Imam al-Hussein goes to is the halting station of As-Sifah. At the halting station of As-Sifah, he meets a famous poet by the name of Farazdak. Imam al-Hussein says, O Farazdak, what is the state of the people of Kufa? Farazdak says, قُلُوبُهُمْ مَعَكْ وَالسُّيُوفُهُمْ عَلَيْكَ. The state of the people of Kufa is that their hearts are with you, but their swords are against you. But you know, at one of these halting stations, a very interesting event, it takes place. Imam al-Hussein, when he goes to the next halting station, the husband of Sayyida Zainab, Abdullah ibn Jaffar, he tries to convince the Imam to stay and he will get amnesty for the Imam from the governor. But at the end, the Imam says, no, I will go towards Karbala. And you find that Abdullah bin Jaffar sends his children On and Muhammad with Imam al-Hussein. You see, On and Muhammad, they didn't leave with the Imam from Medina. Abdullah ibn Jaffar brings On and Muhammad on the route to Karbala at a halting station which was on the border of Hijaz and Iraq. After that, you find that Imam al-Hussein, as he goes through these halting stations, they reach a station known as Du Husam. At Du Husam, the narrator in Tariq al-Tabari, he says that we began to see that there was a large group of people moving towards us. When that large group of individuals was moving towards us, we noticed that it was an army. When that army it came, Imam al-Hussein told us that go and give them water. Each of them was given water by the companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada. As I mentioned the other night, these same people who would deny Hussein water, Imam al-Hussein would give them water. You know, only the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib can have a heart like this. That when Ibn Muljim struck Amir al-Mu'mineen on the 19th of Ramadan, Amir al-Mu'mineen in his will says to Imam al-Hasan that go and make sure this man has water. Make sure his arms aren't tied too tight. You know, Ahlul Bayt treated their enemies in this manner. How do we treat our friends and those in our community if Ahlul Bayt are treating their enemies like this? You know, Imam al-Hussein gives them water. And one man says that Hussein with his own hands would put the water bag upon my mouth and give me water. When Imam al-Hussein, this army gathers in Du Hasam, in this spot, Imam al-Hussein says to that army that are you not those individuals who wrote your letters towards me? They said, yes, we did. Hur begins to say to the Imam that we have commands from Ibn Ziyad that either you give allegiance or I have to report back towards Ibn Ziyad. Imam al-Hussein says to Hur, O Hur, I came because of the letters of the people of Kufa. Hur says, what letters? Imam al-Hussein takes out the bags of letters and he shows Hur. Hur at that moment, the time of prayer was coming. You see, Hur was the example that if there is a speck of goodness in the heart of a person, never give up on that person. Oftentimes, when somebody goes down the wrong path, many of us are ready to give up on that person. But the awliya and the prophets would preach even to the final moment. You know, even when the flood came in the story of Nuh, and the son of Noah went on top of the mountain, Nuh at the end of the day was a father, but his son went on the wrong path. He went astray, and this happens in communities. Many parents, their children go down the wrong path. They ask the question that, what should we do? You carry out what Noah carried out. Even until the final moment, Nuh would say to his son that you're going to be drowned, come aboard this ark. Imam al-Hussein, even to the final moment, he preached to the army of Umar bin Saad that do you not know that I am the grandson of Rasulullah? Do you not know that I am the son of Fatimatu Zahra? Do you not know that my uncle is Jaffar al-Tayyar, that I am from the lineage of Hamza? He would tell them time and time again. But Hur showed the example that if one speck of goodness is there, then Ahlul Bayt are those who will pull the hearts of those individuals. The time of prayer is coming. The Imam says to Hur, O Hur, are you going to lead the prayer for your group and I lead the prayer for my group, or we'll pray together? Hur says, no, you lead the prayer. You see, Hur recognized this about Sayyid al-Shuhada. Then after that, Imam al-Hussein, he turns to Hur and he says, Oh Hur, what is the verdict? Hur says that I will write to Ibn Ziyad. And as I'm writing to Ibn Ziyad, we won't go to Kufa, nor will you return to Medina. We'll pick a spot which is neutral. And as they're going upon the 2nd of Muharram, the caravan of Ahlul Bayt arrives in the land of Karbala. When they arrive in the land of Karbala on the 2nd of Muharram, a letter had come from Ibn Ziyad to Hur, and that letter had said, O Hur, stop Hussein over here. The time has come that either Hussein gives allegiance, or you finish Hussein, or you send him away. You find that Hur, he begins to be perplexed at that moment. But on the 3rd of Muharram, we've reached the 2nd of Muharram in this chronology leading to the day of Ashura. On the 3rd of Muharram, Umar bin Saad arrives with an army of 4,000. Now 4,000 more individuals come to the land of Karbala. You know, when this army of 4,000 came, 4,000 is much smaller than 30,000. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn says that, oh my master, let's go and fight them. But Imam al-Hussein says, Oh Zuhair, I am not the one to begin battle. In other words, Imam al-Hussein didn't want to start this fight. He says, Oh Zuhair will wait. On the 3rd of Muharram, Umar bin Saad comes. But then you find, as the days they go down, on the 7th of Muharram, Shimar arrives in Karbala with orders from Ibn Ziyad to cut the water from the tents. From the night of the 7th to the day of Ashura, all Hur would hear was the cries of the children who would say, Wa atasha, wa atasha. That they would cry, this thirst, this thirst. And as we approach the night before Ashura, Hur would go and he would look at the army of Umar bin Saad and he would look at the army of Hussein. The narrator says, as I looked at Hur, I said to O Hur, that you are the bravest of this army. Why do I see you in such a state of worry? Hur replies by saying that upon this night I find myself in between heaven and hell upon this night. On one side is this army, on the other side is Hussein and the children of Hussein. But as the time of Fajr was approaching, Hur, he goes with his son and servant to the side of Sayyid al-Shuhada. But as Hur approaches the side of Hussein, he says to his servant that my hands had held the horse of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Oh, my servant, tie my arms. Hur, with his arms tied, he comes to Imam Al-Hussein and he says, Halli Tawbah, that is there any forgiveness for me? You see, if you go, you ask any scholar that is there forgiveness for an act, he'll say recite this dua, do this action. But only the Imam can give this guarantee when he says, O Hur, not only have I forgiven you, but Allah has forgiven you, O Hur. But you know what Sayyid al-Shuhada says to Hur after that? He says, O Hur, forgive me. I say, oh Imam, why are you asking for forgiveness? Sayyid al-Shuhada says, O Hur, I am from the household of Ahlul Bayt, O Hur. And O Hur, upon this day you have come as my guest. I don't have water to give towards you, O Hur. You see, Hur, he comes to the side of Imam al-Hussein. Hur says, oh my master, allow my son to be the first sacrifice on my behalf. It's stated in the Maqtal that the son of Hur goes and he begins to fight. As the son of Hur is fighting, a point it comes, فَقَتَلُوهُ إِرْبًا إِرْبًا. They surround him from all sides. The son of Hur falls to the ground. He says, oh father, come help me. But you know what happens? As Hur goes to the body of his son, what does he see? He sees the head of his son in the lap of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Imam al-Hussein says, oh Hur, a father shouldn't have to go to the body of his son. But I say, oh Hussein, a time will come when Ali Akbar falls towards the ground. Upon your knees, you'll go towards the body of Ali Akbar, oh Hussein. You find after that, Hur, he goes to the battlefield. On that point it comes where Hur is struck towards the ground. When Hur is struck to the ground, he says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. That when Hur comes, Imam al-Hussein comes to Hur. Aba Fadl Abbas goes. Muslim ibn al-Awsaja goes towards Hur. Hur, he says to Muslim, O Muslim, I have one wasiyah, usiku bihada, that my final wasiyah is to Hussein. Make sure nothing happens to Hussein. Make sure no arrow goes to the body of Hussein. But I say, oh Hur, a time will come near the time period of Asr when arrow after arrow would go to the body of Sayyid al-Shuhada. A point would come when an individual throws a rock at the forehead of the Imam. The forehead of the Imam will begin to bleed. He'll take his abba, he'll begin to wipe his forehead. At that moment, Hurmala will fire an arrow into the chest of Hussein. Hussein will fall towards the ground. around, at that moment the call will come. Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiya. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-dhalimin. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين.
Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Please.